Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and flanking me today is the one and only Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's going on, Brian?
Well, let's see. We've got an excessive heat warning, a flash flood watch, air quality alerts, local pollen alerts. I think it's the end of the world.
I do. You know, I'm glad that this is like from this past weekend. It's over with, and it's not this upcoming weekend because there's football. There's, teams are reporting to camp. Not the Steelers yet, but they will be. They're going to show up Thursday. We were talking about whether they're going to do the. I'm thinking about the Area 51 stuff all of a sudden. I'm like helicopters and tanks, and I'm just like, it'll be interesting to see what happens now that you don't have Mr. Big Check to show up in a Rolls Royce. I wonder if he even shows up to the Raiders camp. That'll be kind of interesting. Apparently, Bell says he's going to show up, and since he signed a contract, I think these guys kind of have to. So, but some of them still, they'll hold out as long as they can, and they'll take their bumps and bruises. But you know what? We got some stuff to talk about with that, though. There's a lot to look forward to when the Steelers officially open up on Friday, July 26th. So they report on the 25th, and as long as it's not literally hotter than hell outside, hopefully they're out there and doing their thing, because they practice like right in the almost in the dead middle of the afternoon at 2:55, which I always thought was kind of strange. I think do you know any reason why it's 2:55? I think it's just to make the players punctual. Like if it was like 3 o'clock, I don't think it's as fine. What do you want to say? The fine details, making sure that they get it right. Because then if you don't show up or you're late or whatever, then that's kind of a ding to your attention to detail and being a professional or professional football player in that case.
Yeah, I know of no reason why 2:55 is the scheduled time other than it's I don't know. It's different than 3.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask Bob Labriola about that because I that's something that just popped in my head right now, and I'm like, almost all of the practices are 2:55 unless they're at a remote location, like the Friday Night Lights or the Heinz Field deal or something like that. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any scrimmages set up with another team. They haven't done that for like a couple of years now, I think, but they used to sometimes have like the Lions or the Bills or somebody like that they might hold a joint practice with. And I don't know. I think people got tired of fights in some of those, but you still see some here or there. But anyways, it'll be interesting to see. We'll see if there's anybody that's on the whatever pup list or unable to perform, unable to start at camp type deals. Anybody's going to end up on that list to start this year. Nothing. I don't think anybody off the top of my head that has any lingering injuries or issues or anything that's been reported to my knowledge is in that category anyways. But we do want to talk about, there are things to watch for camp, specifically, some players and or camp battles. And not everything's going to be a camp battle because we think some things are maybe a little more cut and dry than others. But I think we want to start off the top of this list. No, we didn't even get into any nonsense. We should talk about something else first because, I know that irritates people and then they feel compelled to comment, which actually helps us get more views and subscribers. So maybe we should do talk about something else, Brian, like Ray Parker Jr., kind of ripping off Huey Lewis in the News for the Ghostbusters theme. And if you put that up against one of those songs, they sound almost identical. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever done that little exercise?
Yeah, I have, but I don't like doing it with that song because I like the Huey Lewis song and I don't like the Ray Parker song.
Huey Lewis in the News. Yeah. So I mean it was the Ghostbusters theme versus I Want a New Drug, and
right.
And I almost screwed that up because Weird Al had a parody of that as well. So okay, now on the football. I don't know. It just felt fitting to bring up some nonsense. Otherwise, we aren't who we are. But we're actually somewhat prepared. We marked down a few names of and things that we want to that we're excited. I don't know. I want to say excited because a few of these aren't necessarily excited. It's more there's more intrigue. Like I need to see more. I need to see what's going on. Who's getting the snaps here or there, and we're going to intentionally. We only have so much time today to cover some of these, so we're going to roll back around when everybody starts to report later in the week, and then we're going to talk about some other names that we might leave off here today. So if you're in the comment section or anything like that, and you're like, why didn't Joe and Brian talk about so and so? Well, there's more. This is kind of the part one. So this is like these are the big names. These are the big things that we want to see, and I don't think there's anything bigger than the first round draft pick, the guy the Steelers moved up to go get with pick number 10 overall. Apparently his name was already written on the Denver Broncos card when the call came in from Kevin Colbert for the Steelers to make the trade, and that is Devin Bush, inside linebacker. I can't think of anybody more that I want to see as soon as camp starts on Friday. Brian, is there anyone bigger than that? I don't think there is. I think this is the, so to speak, the crown jewel of, this could be the biggest missing piece for the Steelers because, everyone still has those lingering thoughts about Ryan Shazier's injury and being able to replace him, and Devin Bush is supposed to be, in all intents and purposes, that guy.
Yeah, this is, I think, without a doubt, the key storyline that's going to take over camp is, was the move worth making, which we all believe it was, and how is Bush going to adjust to life as a professional? It'll be interesting to watch throughout the various drills, and when they start doing 11 on 11 stuff, who's he running with? Is he running with the ones? Is he calling the defenses? How's he stacking up in backs versus backers? What's his coverages like? What groups are they running with him? Is he going to be on the field with just Vince Williams? Is he going to be on the field with Mark Barron? How are they going to play all this? And that, I think that storyline will definitely carry us through camp and through the preseason. It's going to be a real interesting thing to watch because so much of what they hope to accomplish is pinned on that pick and pinned on, how that works out in the scheme of their defense.
I want to say there's a lot of pressure on this young man. I mean, You talk about pressure for certain players that came in. I'm go back to some Steelers picks here. I mean, let's talk about pressure for a second. More specifically, like I remember Senquez Golson was a guy I think that had a lot of pressure on him, even though he didn't necessarily get to achieve or play, even get on the field really. But I think there was a lot of pressure there because the Steelers everybody was like cornerback, right? Artie Burns, I think, fits in that same category. You go back even years, before Jarvis Jones, Shamarko Thomas. These are guys that were expected to step in at some point and fill in for somebody that was a major contributor ahead of them. I don't necessarily know that Bud Dupree had the same pressure, so to speak. There's certain things that come with just playing in the NFL and also being a first-round draft pick, but I think Bud Dupree was kind of eased in a little bit. I don't think guys like Sean Davis or Javon Hargrave, or even for this matter, T.J. Watt or Juju Smith-Schuster had those same types of pressure put on them. James Conner, I don't think, had the same type of pressure. I don't think Terrell Edmunds was expected to just jump in and start right away. So he may have had a different type of pressure because it was, okay, we're not expecting you. They weren't, we're going to ease you in. Oh, all of a sudden you're not eased in. Welcome to the NFL, you know what I mean? And maybe looking over his shoulder as to whether or not if he screwed up, then, Morgan Burnett or somebody else would come in and take their spot. I don't know. Like Devin Bush, I think has an awful lot of pressure on him because there's these comparisons are going to be made. Everyone's going to expect him to be great right out of the gate. And they do have a veteran in Mark Barron that they signed that is capable of playing in that position, although that shouldn't really be, we don't believe that's going to be his primary function. But what's going to immediately happen is, this, there's going to be the critiques. Oh, well, Bush is running with the 4s, or he's running with the 2s, and Barron's in with the 1s, and Bush missed this tackle, or Bush looked out of place for this little thing. And everybody's going to nitpick these little things, and they're going to come up with all these like stupid statistics. How many coaches, call people out for all this dumb stuff during camp? I remember I think Kyle Shanahan was the one just talking about it last year with San Francisco. It's like, now these guys are being recorded and stats and stuff tracked for what they do in practice. It's practice to make perfect. So if he doesn't look perfect right away, or he's not running with a specific group, it's because there's certain things the coaches want to see from Devin Bush. That's what we're excited to kind of see. I don't know that I necessarily care if he runs with the 1s or 2s. What I want to see maybe from Devin Bush is he comes out there and he's maybe he's with the backups, or maybe he's with like the third wave of guys that are kind of, bubble players in a mix, maybe a mix of backups and stuff like that. And I want to see him just totally knock it out of the park and look like he belongs. You know what I mean? Now, if he looks like he's being turned around, twisted, silly, and stupid, every day, all day at camp, that's not gonna sit too well. But I don't think any of us believe at least that will be the case. Everybody has a bad day in the office, so I kind of also want to lower the expectations for everyone. It's like, oh, I'm real excited. We're going to see him in a uniform. I think we're going to see him on the field quite a bit in the preseason too. The only thing is like, I really, I get it. It's a rookie, and rookies need the playing time. I just don't want to see this guy get worn out, because the rigors of going straight from the college game through that season and right into the combine and draft, and then all of these OTAs and rookie mini camps and everything else, and then straight into training camp. These guys don't get a break in year one, and I don't want to see them risk an injury, so to speak, with Bush, at least, because I think he's a key piece that they need to keep healthy. But at the same time, it's like you got to put him out there in order to see what you got, and if he is going to play in the regular season, you know what I mean? Instead of holding on to maybe having an ace up your sleeve and wait like 6 weeks for him to play, like some of the other players we'll probably talk about that got drafted this year.
Yeah, you brought up a couple good points. The first one being, does he look like he belongs? That's going to be a key element that you can visually determine. And I know and you're going to spend some time at camp, and we got a bunch of other SEU people who are going to spend some time out at camp. And that's going to be a key thing to watch is, does he look like he belongs on the field with these guys? Is he lost, or is he not lost? Does he look like he's absorbing things? Is he in the right places, or is he constantly confused? I don't anticipate, from everything we've heard, from everything that's come out of all the OTAs and all of the mini camps, he is locked, a solid lock in his knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think he's going to come out and look confused or look like he's out of place. He understands, his role. He understands what's expected of him, and I think he's getting a good grasp on the defense. Otherwise, they're not going to be letting him call it like they've been doing so far. But yeah, the second point is that injury thing. The last thing they can afford to have happen is to have something, really impede his progress. And it doesn't, God forbid, a season-ending kind of injury, but even just a ticky-tack. And again, you brought up Senquez Golson, and that's a perfect example of a guy, and even Cameron Sutton in his first season. Remember, couldn't get on the field because he just had this lingering injury. Well, they cannot. I mean, they're slightly protected by another guy on the roster in Mark Barron, but they really need this guy to develop. They need him to develop pretty quickly, and that will only be hindered if he has even a bunch of little ticky-tack injuries that don't keep him on the field. The best ability is availability, and he's got to be out there. So seeing how his body stands up to the rigors of what's going on. He comes from a big school. It's not like he's coming from, a smaller college. He's got to have some sense of the type of environment he's going to be in. I think it's going to be on everybody's mind throughout camp. And you're right, he's going to get picked apart and overanalyzed. And I look forward to some of the folks in the stands with telephoto lenses bringing us the absolute hot takes of how on play 7 he twisted his hips the wrong way. I think this speaks horrible for his future.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, how many times have we heard that too? Even like somebody having a bad day, like I don't know, let's just say Terrell Edmonds or James Washington from last year, or I mean, there was nobody that I don't want to say nobody, but I want to say that people were. Remember when the Juju Smith-Schuster pick was considered a wasted pick? Why do they need these wide receivers? Now this is the guy, you know what I mean? And I think that'll be kind of interesting to watch as well. But there was a lot of hype around. I don't want to make it sound like there wasn't hype around James Conner. There was definitely hype around James Conner. James Conner is fun to watch. He was definitely somebody I had my eye on last year because he was coming off of the injury, and he just looked like lightning in a bottle, and now he enters year 3, and that's going to be really, really crazy. And, you think about this with some of these other guys. I mean, you hear nothing but good right now when it comes to Devin Bush. You're never going to hear bad from teammates, I don't think. For the most part, I think they just wouldn't talk. If there was anything bad to say, don't say it at all. That's what my mom said. You know what I mean? And I think that's how a lot of these guys operate. Like, let's face it, there's only so many guys that really that speak publicly about other players within their own locker room, and it's usually Ben, Marquise Pouncey, Ramon Foster, Cam Hayward, and maybe Vince Williams, and maybe even Joe Hayden now is kind of in that group too of the veteran leadership that will speak up about whatever else. But you're never going to hear anything else from TJ may eventually get into that, but TJ doesn't talk a whole lot. So that's when these guys are saying this stuff, I think they speak for the locker room. So when you hear it, there's no reason to not believe it. Now there's going to be different levels of this, so it'll be interesting to see where Bush is among his own teammates and where he is in that pecking order. And then when you get to another level and he starts to play against other NFL teams and maybe other guys, either first team offense or backups and veterans and stuff of that nature, not necessarily all rookies that he's going to be facing on the other side of the field when you get into the preseason games, that'll be kind of interesting, I think. But speaking of the pecking order, you got to talk about Mark Barron too, because I think the intrigue, at least for me, is this was a guy when I saw that the Rams let him go, I said, oh man, I hope, this is one of the things, like I have my Yinzer cousin. He could be a Yinzer, but he's leveled off a little bit. I get the Yinzer part of him because he does a similar thing. He admins a Pirates Facebook group. So he has to deal with a lot of the same criticisms over his beloved Buccos who are, just not good. And that's got to be very irritating to defend something like that. But every now and then, he comes at me with some type of hot take, and we were talking about this. Did you see Mark Barron got released? We should go get him. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to go get this. These guys don't just show up, at the Pittsburgh's doorstep. You know what I mean? There's no way. And all of a sudden, they're bringing him in, and all of a sudden he's signed. And I was like, I was pretty excited about that news. But then, you go and you get Devin Bush, who everybody said, no one else. It's the Post-it note. Bush or bust, right? And it's like, well, how is this going to fit? And you start to think about, well, I don't know necessarily how comfortable I would have been with Barron. Let's put it this way. I don't want to make it sound like I'm down on Barron, because I'm obviously not. I just talked about how excited I was that the Steelers picked him up. But if he were to be the guy next to Vince Williams primarily, the only guy, they didn't draft anybody else. Let's say they didn't draft Bush. I would have more concerns. And I have more concerns too because of the depth behind him, because there would be no Bush. It would just be, Matakevich and, maybe Ulysses Gilbert or somebody like that. That's a rookie as well. And then what they're going to do, in passing down situations, is Barron going to be on the field all the time or anything like that? Because we thought John Bostic was going to be that kind of guy with better speed sideline to sideline. And for, to put Bostic up against what was previously there when they brought Sean Spence back in and Shazier got hurt and Matakevich couldn't be, and even Matakevich himself, Matakevich is an instinctual athlete. He's not a physical specimen of an athlete. So he's got the smarts, he's got the awareness, but he doesn't necessarily have the same physical gifts and traits as some of these other guys to be able to pull off all the same stuff. But, Bostic was definitely an improvement over Spence, and I think Barron is definitely an improvement over Bostic, and I think Bush is definitely an improvement over Barron. So where does it put Barron? Well, Barron's a guy who has played safety, and then they moved him over to linebacker, and he was playing kind of almost like one of these hybrid deals that you're seeing a lot more of because teams are playing with a lot of defensive backs. They got to cover tight ends. That was the Steelers' Achilles heel forever. I don't think tight ends really ate them up a whole lot last year. They were successful in doing that, and I think that's where Barron comes in, but I also think Barron's going to help in some situations where maybe Bush has to be pulled off the field. He makes a rookie mistake, a mental error, zigs instead of zags, and then Barron comes in for a snap or two, and then Bush comes back out on the field, and I think that's where he's going to be relied on for that, and I think he's also going to be relied on as kind of like that. That's what I want to see because that's my gut feeling. I'm not saying they're going to do this, but my instincts or whatever tell me that this is what I want to see is if they use Barron as like the dimebacker type role, and we're going to find that out when they start lining up at camp and start going through some of the drills.
Yeah, you brought that. My point was going to be that is I'll be interested to see what they do with him beyond just mixing him into the linebacker group. Is he going to be a dimebacker? Is he going to, what kind of sets are they going to put on the field with this group? Because I think when you include both Barron and Bush into the mix here, this is the fastest group of linebackers they've had in a long time. Yes, they're smaller. They're what you would consider undersized linebackers, but they've got good coverage skills. They're fast sideline to sideline, like ridiculously fast. And they still have Vince Williams as that, old school type thumper of a back and a guy who can get to the quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how they spread these guys out and what they do. Will there be 3 linebacker sets where they've got, all 3 of them on the field? Will there be different kind of, setups? The whole defense is going to be something that is just going to get hyper looked at all preseason because it's perceived as the problem that we've had the last couple years, and the idea that Bush, Barron, some of the other guys that we drafted, and they're going to talk about like Nelson and those folks are going to bring in are the pieces that they need to fix it. So that's what's going to get looked at. Heaven forbid, like if they get torched in like the first preseason game, right? Let's say that the ones are out there for couple 3 series.
Hold on a second. I don't even want to think of the thoughts of everyone. We're going to come back around on I don't remember when the first game is. Is it it's a Friday game, right?
Yeah,
so we'll probably come boomerang back around on a Monday and have to deal with everyone saying, well, we lost by 40 points. This team is complete crap. Cleveland's going to take the division. And I'm just looking forward to it. Let's just say that.
Well, yeah, because it's going to be this overreaction. That's what I mean when I say they're going to be hyper looked at. It's going to be over scrutinized, and everything. Either what if they shut out whoever they're playing against? No, they didn't. Nobody scored. This is good. We're going to the Super Bowl, no doubt about it. Everything is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Or it's going to be everything is going to be, at the furthest ends of the spectrum as possible. It's either going to be all doom and gloom, or it's it's the second coming, because that's just how we're going to look at this for the foreseeable future. And I think fans need to understand it takes time. Even if everything looks good, it's going to take time, and it's going to be a work in progress. And that is not going to end at preseason. This is, we talk about missing pieces or changing pieces. There are some core pieces that are different here on this defense. And while we anticipate them being upgrades, it won't happen overnight. and it will linger through the first couple games like it always does. But there's a good chance when you talk about this Steelers defense that by game 3, 4, and as you progress into the season, that this is a defense nobody wants to play against.
I sure hope so, man, because the alternative doesn't sound very good. I mean, I kind of like their odds within their own division, and it's just even within their own division. I'm like, I look at other teams and other divisions, across the 8 divisions in the league, and I'm just like, yeah, that team has a far easier path to their division title, or at least it appears they would be. So, it was funny because I was just pulling up some numbers here. I was just looking to see where Devin Bush kind of compared to Ryan Shazier coming out of college. Shazier 6'1", 237, and Bush 5'11", 234. Bush with 32-inch arms. Ryan Shazier with 32 3/8 arms. Shazier 10-inch hands, and Bush 9 5/8 inch hands. So they're very similar in size. I mean, Bush giving up maybe 2 inches in height, but very similar kind of profile here. Shazier on his 40. Let me see. Do I have a 40 here? I do not have a 40 time on here. That's odd. I thought. Never mind. Let's throw that one out. But anyways, no. You know what? I had Barron up too, and Barron had a 4.54. And this is coming out of college too, so guys are either faster or slower now, obviously, and running in shorts and whatnot. Bush 4.43. So slightly quicker, and Shazier didn't. Let me see. Shazier had 25 reps bench press. Bush had 21. The vertical jumps are pretty close. You have 40.5 inches to 42 for Shazier. And I don't think you have a broad jump here. And I'm looking at 3 cones, 6.93 to Shazier's 6.91. And then Shazier's 20-yard was a 4.21, and Bush was a 4.23. We're talking about fractions upon fractions of a second here difference when it comes to the speed at which these guys play. Now, Shazier obviously a very highly aware guy that was starting to remind me. I've said this many times of Troy Polamalu, where he knew the right place to be at the right time, could break down and dissect opponents within seconds. He could kind of read the quarterback's mind. He was getting to that level. He had 3 picks that final year, and he's an inside linebacker. He's not supposed to be the interception machine, nor was, Troy probably as safety supposed to be jumping over the offensive line. So, I mean, you're going to work to their strengths and or weaknesses here. I think, Bush definitely has all the tools, so to speak, but Barron's not a slow guy here either, looking at some of this, his vertical jump, 34.5, broad jump, 10 foot 2 inches. So, I mean, this guy, he has all the measurable traits too. So it's definitely a different ball game when it comes to the 2 linebackers that are coming in, and it's a lot of things to kind of get geeked up for and see. But while we're staying on the defense and talking about the defensive side of things, there's a lot of moving components still with Mike Hilton and his contract, and he says he's going to show up to camp, and it's going to be interesting to see how he competes. And if he doesn't have that deal necessarily worked out because he wants a new contract, he doesn't want to be restricted tender or whatever it's going to be, I forget what his exact tender was, but it's one of these things he'd have to sign, and it's basically just a 1-year kind of minimal contract at this point. More than what he was making before, but not as much as he could be making, and wanting long-term security and financial security too, as far as, being a pro football player. He doesn't want to be out of the league in a year or two, so to speak, or he at least wants compensated, fairly before any type of situation like that could occur. And, he's been a starter, and he's a guy that I think is a key component to this defense. Do the Steelers feel the same way? Will the organization give him a contract, and then this, within a week or two, this whole conversation is all for naught? Or will they, kind of work in Cam Sutton or somebody and try and see what he brings to the table, and maybe he's running with the ones, and they see, well, maybe we don't have to spend the money on Mike Hilton. So I think that's something that you need to take a look at, and I think it's good for Mike Hilton. This isn't like this isn't the same thing as like the franchise tag, obviously. And Le'Veon Bell could have walked right back in last year and played. Would he have been full-time starter? Possibly. Maybe they would have seen enough, depending on when he showed up, for James Conner to just be that guy, and they split carries or whatever. But I think Mike Hilton in this case realizes that, he has nowhere near the clout. He's nowhere near in the same situation that he could be a holdout type guy and not lose his spot. So it's going to be interesting for me to see if the team kind of, values and rewards that type of loyalty and feels that he's as important as maybe me or you feel that he is for the Steelers defense.
Yeah, we talked about this in the positional podcast, and you do wonder where Mike Hilton values himself versus where the Steelers value him. And while both, I agree with you, I think he's a solid and integral part of the defense. He provides, blitzing off the edge. He's decent in coverage, but his production last season versus the first season was slightly different. He wasn't always getting home on the blitzes. It was less of a surprise to some folks when he would come off the edge. You started to anticipate it. So, the question that you end up having is where are those two values at? The Steelers are quite honestly, and I know that this will drive the Bell fans crazy, they're notoriously fair with people.
No,
they don't
get out of town.
They are. They're fair, but they're fair in the sense of they're not a group that overpays. They're not going to set markets, even though they tried to with Bell. They're not going. Generally speaking, they're not going to do that. And so, if Hilton is seeking money that is beyond what the Steelers can imagine, well, this could be a lingering issue throughout the preseason. But he can't play anywhere else. It's you sign your tender, you come in, you play here, or you don't play. And you're absolutely right. Even though he's a key component, if Hilton decides, this just isn't what I want, I'm not going to come. I'm not going to sign a contract because I'm not getting what I want. They'll move on without him.
Yeah,
it's not. They'll find a cog or a piece, and it'll be next man up. Then I don't think any of us wants that to happen. I like Mike Hilton. I like what he brings to the game. I like his tenacity. I like, his kind of personality as I'm the dog here, and I'm going to get what's mine. But it has to work for everybody. But it will be an ongoing storyline, and there's no question that it's going to get some focus paid to it. It's not going to be the same as the Bell or an Antonio Brown or Melvin Gordon or Ezekiel Elliott. It's not the same. You know what I mean? It's not that same tier of athlete, but it is going to be for the Steelers. It is going to be an ongoing thing until it gets resolved.
Yeah, now I'm trying to pull up here. I was looking at some snap counts, excuse me, for Mike Hilton and how integral he is for the Steelers defense. A lot of people are going to be like, well, he's just this extra little cornerback that doesn't do a whole lot. And, of course, his sack number is greatly inflated by that Christmas Day game in Houston 2 years ago where he got the AFC Defensive Player of the Week nod. So I think I find it interesting that based on a few of these matchups that the Steelers, pulled Hilton in for one reason on this one, I believe, Thursday night against the Panthers in a 52-21 just drubbing of Carolina. I think maybe he just got pulled from the field to give people a breather on the short week and, let some other guys play when the game was already at hand. But he wasn't used a whole lot against, Jacksonville and Denver, and those are two teams that were, really kind of pounding and running the ball. Other than that, I mean, the guy is almost a lock to play 70% of the game primarily on average. Now, if you go back maybe a season before to his rookie year, I mean, he came in, he started playing about half the game right out the gate. Then there was when they played the Bears, once again, a team back in 2017 really focused on running the football. They didn't. I got to point to this, so just to think about this. Week 5 again, Jacksonville Jaguars, that bad game that happened where they lost at home and been through all those picks. And then you get to go all the way down toward the end of the season here, and you get to week 14 of the 2017 season against the Ravens. Again, a team that was probably, more or less running the football more than others, especially still even at that point, even though the cupboards were bare for them. They didn't have a whole lot of other things going on there, but he had a little bit of a downtick, not as much of an uptick, but so to speak, he's not being used as – these are teams that aren't throwing out a lot of wide receiver sets where he's utilized in coverage, and therefore he's not able to go out there and just, blitz and do whatever. And that looks to be about, 3 or 4 games per the 2 seasons he's been around. And then, of course, he missed a couple games with injury as well. I want to see here. He was available for all the games his rookie year. He missed one last year where he was dinged up. 3 interceptions so far over this point of time. He has 14 passes, defensed. Has a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and 5 total sacks. His tackles on average range in the 50s, 54 and 57. Most of those solo, 42 and 44. So I think the more interesting thing is what the vibe I get with Hilton is it kind of like almost the Lawrence Timmons thing, where this is a guy we can only put on the field so much of the time, but with the way they play sub-package football, I don't believe that's the case, and I just think it'll be interesting to see, what goes on in camp here. I do believe that they're going to go and try and get a deal done, though.
Yeah, it's the other part of that puzzle, and I was looking for this because Bob Labriola at some point did in his Asked and Answered segment, he did something about somebody asked a question about Hilton, and I was trying to find it so that I could be specific, but I can't, and I'm too lazy to look that hard. So, but essentially, what the point he brought up was that in the current situation that the Steelers are in, where you've got guys like Joe Hayden that needs to get a contract, you've got guys like Javon Hargrave, even Sean Davis. How high on the priority list is Mike Hilton? And secondarily, they simply don't have cap room right now to do anything extravagant with Mike Hilton. And, I know that Labs thought the only scenario that would make any sense is he's going to play for what his exclusive rights tender is, which is $645,000. And that's what he's going to play for under 2019, or he's not going to play. Primarily because of the cap space. And it does. I mean, it throws a situation. And look, the Steelers are pretty good at finagling ways to do it. And if I thought that Hilton was going to look for a deal that was, $2 or $3 million a year, maybe they could find a way to finagle that kind of cap space and make it work. But I don't know that that's what he's looking for. If it's upwards of 4 or 5, $6 million a year, even they simply don't have the ability to do that now. And what's more important to the Steelers long term, Joe Hayden, Javon Hargrave, Sean Davis, or Mike Hilton? Yeah, I can't answer those questions, but they will be finding them. This is going to be, this is a season that's going to lead to an offseason where there is a lot of negotiating that's going to have to go on. The Steelers didn't have a lot of free agent issues this year. But next year, they're going to start to have guys whose contracts are expiring, rookie contracts are up, all kinds of things that they have to start to think through and work through to get and maintain their core of players. And that is going to play into what they do with Mike Hilton right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. The Steelers have the least amount of cap space. I know I'm on Spot Track, which is sometimes you got to take them with a grain of salt. But the reason I use their site over sometimes I'll look at Over the Cap for this stuff too. But Over the Cap has a website. As we'll probably get around to some of those guys that work there who do a fantastic job. But your website looks like it's from 1990, and it's very hard to read at times. So I'm going to go with Spot Track here, and they have overall top have 51 cap space, the Steelers have the least amount right now. They're at the very bottom of the league. And, cap space with all, if it'll sort, they're at the very bottom of that as well for 2019. If we jump over to 2020 for cap space, they're still under the gun. They're going to have to, right now, they're in the negative. So, the cap will probably get raised and erase some of that, which means even if it goes up 10 mil, so to speak, it gets a marginal bump. That doesn't leave them with a whole lot. That's like money that you need in order to sign rookies. So there's going to be some stuff that's going to have to go. We've been talking about this too. We were also requested to talk about the contract stuff, and that'll be coming because we're just kind of holding off to see. Usually these deals get done like in the first, weekend or two of camp, and then we're going to come around and start talking about, okay, who's the next guy, who's the guys they're going to wait on, and you make very good points here because who can you replace? Can you replace Javon Hargrave at this point? I don't know. You got to see what Isaiah Buggs can bring. Can you replace Joe Hayden at this point? I don't think so. You know what I mean? Yeah. This isn't a guy that you just, find on the streets or whatever. Can you replace Sean Davis even? I don't believe so for what he does and how reliable he is. I know he's a quiet player. Maybe he doesn't make that much of a splash, but you don't hear his name called a whole lot either when it comes to making mistakes. He's an Iron Man and he doesn't miss any time on the field. He just solidly does his job and does so quietly, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then you get to Mike Hilton, and it's like, well, could they replace Mike Hilton? As much as we love and we have an infatuation with certain players, I don't think you could just dump him, you don't want to dump him off to the side, but if he were not brought back and they didn't sign him beyond this, we already talked about Cam Sutton and some of the other corners that they have that could potentially fill that role. So it's a very interesting thing that's going to be a storyline going into camp. Continuing with the cornerbacks, there's a whole bunch of guys we didn't even name. That's how many. Yeah. That's how many they got. I want to see what Steven Nelson does, man. The one thing about not having Antonio Brown out there now is that you don't get to see if he makes anyone look foolish. Like he used to line up against Artie Burns all the time, and that's going to be another guy we're going to be looking at. And, of course, the rookie Justin Lane. 3 corners. What groups are they running in? Now, of course, we already mentioned all of those, caveats when it comes to, well, are they with this group, or that group? And does somebody kind of move up and move down? And, right out the gate, Steven Nelson with the ones. I want to see what it looks like. Artie Burns, where's he at? Is Justin Lane? Are they in the same group? Are they playing across from each other? Are they like 4 or 5 deep in these rotations? Will Artie get a lot of snaps to kind of prove that he still belongs, or is his story kind of already written, so to speak? I think that's another one that we're going to be, highly anticipating. And I think there's going to be a lot of, the usual volatility and negativity surrounding Artie Burns immediately. Like you said, the folks are going to have like their camera phones or whatever, and they're going to be putting things out on Twitter. Well, Artie Burns got beat here, or Artie Burns is just standing on the sideline waiting for a chance to come in. And it's just, okay, pump the brakes on all this and let's see where it goes. I think Artie Burns' main value is going to be determined when they go and play these exhibition games, because they already know who he is. They got to integrate Steven Nelson into this. He's new to the Steelers, though he's a veteran. You got to get that rapport. You got to get him on the same page with everyone else. And Justin Lane's a rookie, so you don't know anything about him, and he's going to need that time. Whereas Artie Burns reminds me of like Landry Jones last year. Landry Jones, well, he doesn't need to get in there because they already know who he is, and if they find that there's somebody else that's an improvement, just like Jones, Artie Burns will be out the door too. He'll be looking for work elsewhere. You know what I mean? He won't make the cut.
Yeah. I think what I want to see here is how the communication between the corners and the defensive backfield, the safeties, plays out. So many times, the biggest issue I think that people had with Artie was he would make mental errors or errors in communication. And he would, you'd see after he got beat on a play, his hands are in the air. He's like, what was I supposed to do? And that breakdown in communication tends to be pretty obvious. So what I want to see from a guy like Steven Nelson or, Justin Lane is, are they able to pick up on the reads that they need to pick up? Are they clear in what their roles are? Are they clear in who they're passing off in zone, or what their responsibilities are? Because just tightening that up will be an improvement. And from the standpoint of Artie Burns, you're absolutely right. I think we've said repeatedly, I think this is Artie's last shot to make the team, going forward and to preserve his position as somebody the Steelers are interested in. I think it's a long shot because, sad to say, his arrow has been pointing down and not up. But whether or not he can recover his confidence to come back and become the kind of player the Steelers are going to be able to utilize, I don't know. We repeatedly said this in the cornerback podcast. Sometimes it just takes a new look, a new place, a fresh start. And that's not going to happen here. And even elsewhere, you never know. You never know with these guys. But this is definitely his last hurrah. And if he manages to make the squad, which I think, in some ways may be a long shot, how he can grow is going to depend on what this season's like. And if Steven Nelson tends to work out, how much time is Artie Burns really going to get on the field? What are they going to do? Because they're not going to pick up his fifth-year option.
No. And you know what? Being a first-round pick, I mean, that's something teams are still going to want to work him out. I mean, even Jarvis Jones got a second chance in Arizona for a year.
Absolutely.
It's because, the pedigree these guys come in with, how much of an athlete they are. There are things that are coachable that can be fixed. So does Artie have certain tells that people have picked up on that, makes him beatable? Did he have some undisclosed injury or something else going on in his life that maybe, was hindering his performance? You don't know. Or is the rest just simply, the guy's been figured out and he just doesn't have it? There's so many different ways to approach this, and that's the way they're going to be looking at this. They have a slew of corners, and if it looks like there's anything redeemable there that can contribute to this 53-man roster and help the Steelers win games, that even means special teams. I still think he got robbed on blocking the field goal against the Chargers. You know what I mean? It's just, you look at it split second, the guy's faster than a hiccup. So, I mean, if he can contribute in any way, he may end up on this roster. So he'll be someone to watch. Some more guys to watch is going to be the entire, specialists group. We had a whole show on this. As exciting as it is to talk about kickers, punters, and long snappers, these are all things that, are under the gun right now. It's very important. It's a third phase of football. It determines field position and, how your team's going to end up at the end of the game. So your defense, they get an extra 5 yards or 10 yards where you're backing your opponent up with a solid punt, for example, and or a well-placed kickoff. And now that alters the way that the opponent is going to call their game at a certain in certain situations, and it may help your defense to be more aggressive or whatever be the case. In the same sense, you can't have guys that are missing extra points and field goals and leaving points on the table. So it's one of these things where, it's not like Boswell's going to, he's not going to have a ton of, some days he doesn't even practice, you know what I mean? He was just kind of chilling on the sideline, but he has competition this year. Jordan Berry has had competition each year that he's been around for the most part, but Boswell is not. So now that there's competition there, I think more or less, you're going to look for this. You're not going to see a whole lot because it's usually, he may have a tee and just, he's kicking the ball through the uprights or something from different angles and whatnot and just getting some work in, with some practice. The real game situation is going to be, does this guy ding one off the uprights in the preseason, or does somebody shank a punt in the preseason? And all it takes is one play really to cost somebody their job in the preseason, especially when they're on the hot seat, so to speak, already. So that'll be something to watch as we go forward. I don't know. We need to belabor that too much, Brian, because there's two other bigger topics here before we close out the show. And of course, I don't know which one's going to be the bigger headline right now. Right now, going in, it's going to be the who's replacing Antonio Brown kind of storyline. And you got three gentlemen by the names of Dante Moncrief, James Washington, and Deontay Johnson. I'm not going to put Eli Rogers and Ryan Switzer in there because I feel they'll be operating out of the slot. And I know Antonio Brown kind of did that, and the Steelers receivers are everywhere. But what you're really looking for is who's the other guy besides Juju Smith-Schuster, because before it was who was the other guy besides Antonio Brown. Then you got that guy, and now Brown's gone. And so there's Juju and who else? And a lot of people talk about double teaming Juju, and he won't have the same numbers. Well, if that's the case, who's going to rise to the occasion on the other side? And you have a veteran, a second-year guy, and a rookie. And they, probably the nod starts with the guys who've already been, in the league with the team, and then the rookie. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out as well.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about Chris Boswell is what I really want to see is in the first preseason game, we may get a tell on what's going to happen. As you said, if he comes out even for an extra point, which are no longer gimmies, in which he had problems with last season. If he misses a couple extra points, or he starts to ding the uprights on field goal attempts, then you got to start to worry, and then you got to think, okay, maybe there's going to be a switch here. But if Boswell comes out and his money the way he was the season prior, and he just drills extra points going through, field goals are hitting, I think that's what he needs to have happen without a doubt, because the first screw up, the first miss, the first shaky kick, that's going to get in his head. So what we really all want to see is in that first preseason game, score some points, let him kick a field goal, let him kick some extra points, hope that they all go through, and then maybe we'll cruise forward. Now, as to the wide receivers, here's the thing. Where Juju is really, honestly, the most effective, this doesn't mean he can't play on the outside, because he can, but He is absolutely devastatingly effective from the slot.
Yes.
So it's not just, who else is going to be on the outside with Juju? It's, can there be two guys on the outside so Juju can play inside in the slot? And Dante is going to be one of those guys, unless we all are so far off the ball on a guy who was even productive with Blake Bortles.
Cody Kessler.
Yeah, Cody Kessler. This is a guy with a Hall of Fame quarterback being able to throw to him. I think Dante Moncrief can have a solid year. Again, I don't know that he's going to be all pro or a Pro Bowler, at that level, but I think he can have a really solid year and be a companion to Juju. And so I think the same thing of James Washington. Look, it is, for some people, it's easier to adjust to the pro game than others. Some people, it takes a little extra while. So if what Washington went through last season with the struggles that he had and how he ended up coming on with the dropping of weight, if he's a little quicker, we could see a lot out of James Washington. Those are the two guys I anticipate, being able to take the outside positions either with Juju on the field or, if they're in two receiver sets, one of those two guys being there with Juju Smith-Schuster. Deontay Johnson, I want to see, this is a small school guy. I want to see what he brings. I like, we talked about it when the pick was made. I like the pick. It'll be interesting to see how he grows and what he provides. But I don't know that I anticipate, unless one of those other two guys falls off. Hopefully he is a ancillary piece this season and then starts to grow into it as time goes on. But I think everybody's going to want to watch, where are these guys going? And the one piece of caution I will say is, as Zach Adonia is guilty of this more than anybody I know in the entire universe. as the catches come in during preseason, as the training camp catches happen, and people are wowed by the magnificence of some catch with limited coverage skills and or whatnot. Oh, look what he did in training camp. He's going to be fire. He's going to be lit. Let's just wait and see. We need to see. We need to see it in game. I call it the Justin Hunter syndrome, I guess. Is it Justin? Was that who it was?
Yeah, definitely
Justin Hunter.
Justin Hunter, Damone Patterson, Shaq Phillips. I mean, any of these guys that Marcus Tucker. Yeah.
Looked fantastic in camp. Looked fantastic in a couple preseason games early on. Then vanish off the face of the earth and make zero contribution really as the season progresses. I don't think that's going to be the case with either Moncrief or James Washington or even Johnson, to be honest. But it will be interesting to see which one of them emerges to be the real second option for Ben, and whether both of those guys can make strides so that when you have three receiver sets, you're back to that anybody can play anywhere kind of thing.
Yeah, my point with Rodgers and Switzer is that I don't think they're going to be on the outside at all. Those are guys that are primarily slot guys. Yes, Juju definitely operating very well out of the slot. So is Vance McDonald. I mean, just motion him out. You know what I mean? You may even see Jalen Samuels in some of that. I think the biggest thing here is if Dante Moncrief was in the ballpark of 60, 70 balls that he catches and 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, I won't be disappointed. I wouldn't be disappointed if that were James Washington. I won't be disappointed if James Washington only has 400 or 500 yards and 40 catches or something of that nature. You're leaving on the table. Ben threw, I was looking at this. It was something like 1,300 yards to tight ends. Let me see. It was 610 to Vance McDonald, about 500 or 4 something. So you got 1,000 between McDonald and Jesse James. And so 1,100 here. Let me see. Xavier Grimble about 86. So about 1,100 with the tight ends last year, just in yardage, and a boatload of targets too. James Conner, 500 yards, 55 balls caught. He could have an uptick. Samuels had very limited time, and he caught 26 passes for 199 yards and 3 touchdowns. He could see an uptick, but where we may not see an uptick is, and I don't think it's going to be possible, is Ben Roethlisberger attempting 675 passes. If he drops back down to his levels he had, in the previous few years, okay, he had 608 in 2014, but in 2015, 469 and 509 and 561. You don't even have to worry about Antonio Brown not being there. There's all of those, kind of most of those targets are, dissipate as, maybe they focus on running the ball a little more or try some other things. So that'll go away right there. I think Deontay Johnson's definitely the lowest man on this right now, and it might take some time to ease in because I think they need to see what James Washington brings. I think Washington's primarily an outside guy, like you said, in Moncrief. It just never really occurred to me, at least, that I think that we would see Moncrief, Washington, and Juju, all three of them as the receivers on the field at the same time. I always keep thinking it's in some case Moncrief comes off or Washington comes off, and the interchangeable part could be Switzer or Rodgers. If they go to 4, then it's all bets are off for 4 and 5 sets. Johnson can also play outside too, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Maybe there is somewhat of a rotation, but I don't see Juju just primarily operating only out of the slot right now. I mean, I agree. Yeah. He's got to be all over the place, and he's going to be relied upon as such as the top wide receiver. Now it's going to be interesting because who's going to be throwing the football to these guys in the preseason? This may be the storyline that hasn't come out yet that will be the storyline, and that is going to be Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph. Who's the backup to Big Ben? Will it be much of a competition or not? We didn't really know. We thought Josh Dobbs was on the hot seat last year, and he certainly looked amazing in the preseason. He looked like an NFL quarterback. He led 6 scoring drives of 70 or more yards. It may have even been 75 or more yards, most of those starting, touchbacks and whatnot for those drives. And he was just, that's in 4 games in not playing a full game. It's pretty impressive. Mason Rudolph playing with a lot of guys that, didn't make NFL rosters. last season. Will they mix it up and try and see more from Rudolph? Does any of this really mean a hill of beans when Ben is signed for several more years, and these guys may not be on the roster when Ben hangs it up anyways? I think for right now, any of the hoopla that comes with this is, let's just see if these guys don't look like your typical trashy backup NFL quarterback that throws balls and they sail over someone's head and nearly hits like a journalist or something on the sideline. Somebody that's like photographing this or something like that, hit a cameraman or something like that. So I think that's going to be the more important thing. You're not going to see Ben in the preseason games, but at the same time, Ben gets some veteran days off too, where you're going to see probably Dobbs and Rudolph maybe worked in with some ones here and see how it all plays out with the other components that we had mentioned, such as the wide receiver groups and something like that. It'll be interesting to see more or less like, does James Washington, who does he work best with? Ben, Dobbs, Rudolph, his college teammate in Mason Rudolph, right. And some of those things of that nature. But this will definitely be a storyline that's really not much of a storyline. Just be happy in the fact that you may have two guys that are capable of being a QB2 instead of like a defined QB2 and QB3 that you would never want to enter the game.
Yeah, I still feel like this is a preseason where if Mason Rudolph is the guy of the future, which is hard, like you said, it's hard to say when Ben's signed for at least 3 more years and hasn't ruled out playing beyond that. If Mason Rudolph is that guy, though, then this is the preseason he needs to step into the number 2 role. And he has to do that by outplaying Josh Dobbs. And that's not to take anything away from Josh Dobbs, who, as you said, last season in the preseason absolutely was better than we ever thought he was going to be. Made great strides in what he was able to accomplish. Came in and threw the one pass in I think it was the Ravens game, that with Ben. But then the Raiders game didn't look so good, didn't look so hot.
Nor did anyone.
Yeah, no. But it's be interesting to see and how they do, because those are the guys that are going to get the bulk of the work in the preseason. Devlin Hodges will probably get a little bit of time at the end of games in the fourth quarter, at least for the first couple games. And Ben will play a quarter for the third game, probably something like that.
Yeah,
and that'll be about it. And it really will be important from the standpoint of letting the Steelers know what they have in these two guys, and they thought enough of Mason Rudolph to take him, with the pick they got from Martavis, when they certainly had other needs, and nobody was like, well, we desperately need a quarterback. So it's important. I mean, it is an important battle in the sense that you need to see progress from Mason Rudolph. Josh Dobbs also could show that he's the guy. And the other kind of caveat here is that if you've got 2 backups that both look like they have the potential to be NFL starting quarterbacks, all of a sudden you also have some equity there.
Yes, you do.
And I'm not suggesting that the Steelers are going to look to trade either Mason Rudolph or Josh Dobbs, but if the right, these guys are also, showing their wares to everybody, not just the Steelers. And if the right deal were to come along for a quarterback-starved team that said, you know what, I got to get somebody better than what I got, and Josh Dobbs or Mason Rudolph looks like that guy, and the Steelers feel like the other guy is perfectly adequate to maintain as the backup, and they aren't convinced either one of them is the future of the franchise, who knows? Who knows? And I'm not suggesting that either Josh Dobbs or Mason Rudolph is going to get traded away. I'm simply stating it's not out of the realm of possibilities, considering the situation the Steelers find themselves in right now. It's an important season for both of those guys, just to see where's the pecking order going to be, and how are they going to grow in their position.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds you of, I don't know necessarily Josh Dobbs or Mason Rudolph will get the opportunity that Jimmy Garoppolo or Jacoby Brissett got, but just playing behind Tom Brady and being part of that Patriots, organization was quite a bit of collateral, and they had the ability to get, some draft picks. It wasn't like the biggest earth-shattering deal, but, they got a little bit more out of their investment, you know what I mean, in those players, and they wouldn't have been able to keep them for much longer either, so they at least got something. And that could be the same thing here because Ben has that longer deal. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but you call your shots right now, and there's teams that are definitely going to be eyeballing that type of situation because teams don't have necessarily a starting quarterback in some situations. They definitely, in a lot of situations, don't have a backup. I mean, it just surprised me when I saw some of the players that were still throwing passes or backing up in the NFL or something like that. You know what I mean? Like who did Tennessee have behind Mariota? Was that Blaine Gabbert? Was he still somebody still talk about somebody that, you're still trying to get something out of that. I mean, this guy's been around like everywhere, and he is a former first round pick, 10th pick overall, and he's been on, 5 different rosters. That was, now he's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's like, we'll see what Bruce Arians could do with that. So everyone's trying to figure it out. But anyways, you know what? We're up against it, Brian. So thanks once again for joining me.
Always a pleasure. And, probably not the next time we roll around, but very shortly after that, there'll be actual football that has been played.
Yay.
And that's just like, wow, our long national nightmare is over.
Yeah, I know, man. I mean, you wait all like it seems like it's just been too long, and it's the best time of the year. I just love all of it. You get into the fall, and I just love everything about it. It's just nothing else like it. And this is where all the speculation is like you keep talking about everything, and it's like now we finally get to see all the things we were hypothesizing on. I couldn't even say it, or guessing, in lesser terms.
Yeah.
And seeing if we were on the mark or not. So anyways, everyone, thank you for listening as usual. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, we encourage our listeners to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.